Alright, so to start this project out, I put in Battlefront 2 on my PlayStation, and I ran around the map of the Jabba's throne room just to kind of check out detail and look at a couple things so I could get a good idea for a sketch, so I could sketch out kind of what I wanted to do. I used a couple different prints for this video that I will go over in the next part. This first part is going to just be the basic construction of the throne room and the Rancor pit. I use a packing foam to get all the base done and textured and all that stuff. So this video is just going to be how I made the basic structure of the stuff. So you can see I have that throne already printed. That is a file from Galactic Armory. I have a few of his files. His files are amazing, and I've printed out a few of them. So what I used that throne as I printed that first to make sure that was the size I wanted everything to be. So everything is based off of that chair throne. So what I'm doing here is I'm making the base of the throne that the throne sits on. It's actually the original base that Jabba would sit on in his throne room. It's actually a really cool detail that like that throne piece is original, and then they just put that chair on top of it. That's pretty cool. So like I said, this is some packaging foam. I think it came out of I think the desk I bought. This was all wrapped inside. So I cut that base of the throne out. I'm using it to size up the back of the throne, the stairs and everything that go up to the there's like a spit. There's like a spit up there, like a cooking spit. So I kind of mark out where I want my steps to be. On the side here, I'm putting the height of the steps, and I'm using my razor knife just to go through, slice those off. Your cuts don't have to be like 100% perfect because I cover this with like plaster of Paris after. And the throne room is kind of like old and beat up anyway, so nothing is like square and perfectly cut. It's all kind of worn and everything. So I cut the steps, then I go through and I cut this circular step out. So that is the top of the steps there. I left the back a little bit long. You can see that line in the back there. I left that long on purpose for the back wall. So here I'm just making sure that the throne piece sits on the inside. Here I am starting construction on the back wall. I sized this up to the back first, but it wasn't tall enough, so I cut another section out of that same material. I just hot glue those two pieces together. Hot glue works really well on packing foam. Other glue actually will dissolve it, and spray paint will dissolve it too. So hot glue is your best bet for that kind of stuff. So now what I'm doing is for that, actually this isn't the back wall. This is it's the same size as the back wall. But what I did is this is the front ceiling part of the throne room. So I'm using this little bucket here to measure out the curve of the ceiling. The ceiling has got a curve to it. So we get that basic shape. But it was a little bit too tall for my liking, so I just added this new line a little bit further down. Now I cut that to the height that I want. carefully cut out the curve of this front wall. So now I'm putting that on, making sure that the size fits. So this is like the front wall of the throne room. Now to add some depth to that, I'm adding some pieces of foam to the side wall, making sure that it's flush to the inside of that curve, the curve cut there, not flush to the outside wall, just so that the wall has the same thickness. So there you can see that. It doesn't take a lot to get this kind of stuff put together. It's just math and kind of planning out what you're doing. This is a piece of pipe I have. I sharpened it up, and I'm using this to cut out the circles on the back wall. This piece is the actual back wall. It's got 3 circles on the back wall, depending on what artwork you're looking at. It's one of those things where everything you look at is always different. I kind of was basing my stuff off of that Battlefront thing I showed you, but if you watch the Book of Boba Fett, it's a little different, and if you watch Return of the Jedi, it's a little different. So kind of just make it up as you go, and it's kind of what I'm doing here. So I cut that middle piece out, recess it a little bit, cut that circle out, recess that a little bit, and then I shave it off the back to make sure that the back wall is flat, so that when I frame it in, it'll be flush. So now I'm starting working on the vents. Those 2 circles on the side there have vents. You can kind of see on my phone there the picture I'm looking at. So I use that same pipe that I used to cut the vent out, and I trace around it on this 2mm What the Foam, and I make it a little bigger. I draw it a little bit bigger than that pipe. And now I'm taking a strip of 2mm foam here, and I'm wrapping it around that pipe and cutting it where it meets, so that I can glue that together and make my it's like the ring. It's like the ring of the vent. So now again, I trace that pipe on the foam there, so I can cut the back of the foam out. And then now I glue my ring around that hole. So now that that is done, now I cut these little tiny pieces and I add them to the middle, glue them to the middle. Again, a lot of reference images. Some show that there's like 4 vents, some show 3 vents. So I just went with the 3 because it was easier and I didn't want to be making tons of little vent pieces. So now I'm using some cereal box cardboard, and I'm making the roof of the throne. The roof has these like grates in the ceiling. You can see in a lot of pictures of the throne room there that there's ambient light that's coming in from the top, and you can see like the pattern on the wall. So I cut the little pattern out of this cardboard. So I guess I didn't film it, or I forgot to film it, or lost the footage, but I covered all of that packing foam with plaster of Paris. I just mixed up a little bit of plaster of Paris with some water. And, yeah, my brush broke. So I mixed up some plaster of Paris and put that all over the foam, thin layer, and let it dry. And now I took some glue and some paint, mixed it together, and then I brushed that over everything to seal in that plaster of Paris. In my experience, that plaster of Paris, your paint will peel off of it because it's still kind of, I guess it's still kind of wet underneath sometimes. Maybe I'm just impatient, but I don't know. That glue and paint trick works really well for your primer. So these are some 3D printed little pieces here. These are the little gargoyles that go on the front of the throne. I printed those out. This model I found on Thingiverse. They don't have the rings in the mouth, but you'll see how I add those later. What I'm doing here is I'm dry brushing on some more of a, I think it's khaki. It's a khaki paint. I guess that's the name of it. So I just brushed that on. Everything in the throne room gets that color. So the throne base, the steps, the walls, all the walls. I didn't show painting all the walls because it's the same process as that I'm doing on the step and stuff. So I paint that khaki on top of that glue and brown mix. Now I'm using some lighter tan, and now this I am just gingerly trying to dry brush on top of that, and you can see the textures kind of start to pop out from that plaster base coat that you put on. So now going back to those gargoyles, I got a little bit of this wire here, and it just happens that my screwdriver here is the same circumference that I need. So what I do is I wrap this wire around my screwdriver here, make sure it's tight, and it's kind of the same way that you make chainmail. If you're making chainmail, it's you wrap wire and then you cut it, and it makes your rings. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is use my wire cutters here, and I'm just cutting that. And then once you cut it here, you can see you got all these little rings. So what I do is I kind of open up that ring, slide it through the gargoyle's mouth, and then I pinch it back together, and then slide it back through the mouth so that the pinched part is in the mouth. And now I can put a base coat of paint. I'm using black paint for the base of the gargoyle head and the ring. I'll paint all that black. These are like I think they're like brass or copper. So what I do here is I mix up some of this green and bluish color here to simulate like patina from like copper or brass. When it gets weathered and rusty, it doesn't rust, it gets a patina on it, which is like this greenish color. So I paint that on the whole thing, then I go back through with some of my bronze, and I just dry brush that on top, and it really helps it make it look like that patina is in the creases and in underneath the bronze there, so it's still kind of shiny, but you can tell that it's old bronze or old copper. So now with the throne room done, I'm starting construction on the thing that's going to be on the bottom, which is the Rancor pit. I feel like you can't have a throne room without the Rancor pit. So I cut out the base, cut out some pieces for the side walls, and I needed to add a little bit to them, so I just cut out some more foam here. So now I glue all those together. You can see I got arrow markings on there. It's just so I know and remember which way those squares go. So now those are the side walls. Now the right side wall here has the door, the Rancor door. So I cut that out. I already printed out my Rancor, my 3D print. So I used that to size for the door. And then I'm using some 2mm What the Foam, tracing the door pattern out, and then cutting out my What the Foam just a little bit bigger than that. So then I can use the actual wall piece to trace where the door needs to be, and get the draw the little teeth in there. Then use my razor knife and I just cut the door out. So now I'm using my razor knife here, and on the inside of this door, on the wall, I'm just chipping away at the foam, just to make it look like it's cut rock. And I'm using the back of my knife here to scrape the side of the wall here. This will pull the foam and make it so it's not smooth and flat. It makes it rough, so that it kind of resembles the rocky wall of the pit. So you can see how much texture is on that wall after. Now everything that I scrape off from all the walls of the pit, I collect all of that, and I save all of that in my little Tupperware bucket here. These will all get turned into rocks and stones and stuff later. Even that door I kind of rip apart just so I have some bigger pieces, just so everything's not all the same size and texture. Just add some bigger stuff. So you can see all the walls are done, how that looks when it's all textured and stuff. So here is some plaster of Paris going in, a little bit of glue, and some brown paint. Now, I don't think I needed to really add plaster of Paris to this, but I did. It worked. I don't know if it was beneficial or not, honestly. I think just the glue would have been fine. So I mix all that stuff up, and I just kind of throw it in there. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get it all in the corners to make the corners not look like they're 90-degree cut walls. I'm adding all that to the corners to kind of bulk up the corners to make it look like it's been cut out and it's just not square. So even in the front, I kind of add some to the base of the floor and the wall, just to kind of make it look like it's, just try to make it look more natural than just like perfectly cut, foam. So now here's the ceiling. I already kind of measured out where I want the pit gate, floor grate to be. So what I'm doing here is the same thing, where I'm just kind of carving that away to make it look like that was chiseled out, so it's not perfectly straight. And then on the bottom, I use the back of my ruler here to do the same thing that my knife did to get these things. And you can see how how much of a mess that process is. So now I'm using glue and brown paint as a primer for the foam, just to paint that in there, seal it all in, get all the cracks and all the nooks all covered in. I do that on the whole pit. Now going back to that cereal cardboard box, I cutting out my grate for the floor. This was a pain. I had the option to 3D print these, and I decided not to because I was like, oh, that won't be that bad just to make these out of paper and cardboard. But I should have printed them because I spent a lot of time on these. Okay, so now that all that stuff is dry, I'm going in with some brown, some lighter brown. And I'm just painting that on everything inside the pit, just trying to add some highlights and make it not all just the same color. I kind of dry brush some stuff on the floor if there's some rocks and stuff on the floor. Now for the top here, the top is sand and Jabba's throne room. So this is some glue again with some lighter brown. Put that on first. I mixed up some actual sand and glue. Sand and glue, yeah. Sand and glue and a little bit of that same color paint. I mixed that all together, and I just spread that around on the whole top. I make sure not to cover the whole back, because that is where the stairs and the throne are going to be sitting. So I don't really necessarily want that on the whole thing. I just want it to look like it blends together, you know. And I also take some of this sand mixture and I spread on top of that grate just to make it look like the wind kind of swept some sand into the corners and stuff of that grate. A lot of people will use glue and just put glue on the base and just sprinkle some of that hobby sand on top. I had a bag of that hobby sand and I couldn't find it. I might have used it for something, I don't remember, but what I did have is a bag of tube sand out in the shed. So it's not that color sand, you know, like the beige sand. It's really dark, so that's kind of why I did the glue and paint mixture with the sand, just to give it that color that I was looking for. I figured that'd be a lot easier than just putting it down and painting it later. Just mix the paint with it and just put it on. I didn't want to be painting it again. So now I'm taking my brush here and just kind of try to get some of this sand mixture off the floor and onto the rocks in the corner and onto the sidewall, just to make it look a little bit more realistic. So that is the basic construction for the Book of Boba Fett throne room. I hope you guys like it. I hope you will stick around for the second part, where I will be printing all the pieces and the Boba Fett and the Rancor and painting all that stuff and adding some lights and some cool effects. And yeah, I hope you guys stick around and check that out. I'll catch you in the next one.